right, this one is huge today. So today we're gonna speak with Tammera Holmes. She's the CEO and founder of AeroStar Corp, as well as Avion Institute. Honestly, she's a legend in the aviation industry. Um, so as for how I met her at the same event that I actually met Kevin at. Um, and she was just one of the speakers there, and what she said just resonated with me. Here's a woman of color, who looks like me and is doing like things that I've literally never like could imagine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then one thing like you probably don't remember, but it literally is like stuck with me throughout my whole like journey so far. Um, so you talked about how you need to eliminate like distractions and you can't get caught up. If you want to be, successful, and, if you're in the car with somebody who's not doing the best, actions, like, you're going to get caught up, you know what I mean? And like those words, like were said to me at like the perfect time, honestly.
Wow.
It was just like at that moment, because my junior year is the year that I went to, the program, and, I met you. Um, like I wasn't, the best. I wasn't like, necessarily doing what I needed to do. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
So, but I feel like I needed to hear that, you know what I mean? And it just, it sparked something in me. And, it honestly kind of changed, like how I looked at like my future. You know what I mean? So I just want to thank you. Start off by
Oh,
thanking you for
it
that.
really got me teary-eyed, and I haven't even said anything.
I went to Utah State after high school, and I was majoring in their flight program. Their flight science degree. Long story short, there was just a lot of like, unfair treatment, and just stuff that just was not right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And stuff that I had to overcome because I'm a person of color. I'm the only Black student in that program, in on the campus. In that degree. So it's just a lot of stuff that I had to overcome. And going through my day to day, it wasn't something that I was like, oh well, this isn't right. You know what I mean? Like I just thought this is what it took to become successful and become a pilot. And then it wasn't until things got so bad that I realized like, oh wow, like this hasn't been right since the beginning. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like my driving force to create L.S.C Club. When I went off to college, like people were like, oh, like you must be going to the military, you must be enlisting. And I'm like, no, like I respect people who do that, but that's not, something that, I would do. So I just want to show people like, hey, like you don't need to go to the military, like you can make six figures, flying planes, or you know, managing airports, or creating your own business. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just to open doors, for people who, don't even know like this is an option. So that's kind of like my backstory in short. So let's hear about you.
Well, first of all, my backstory is so similar to yours that it's almost frightening to know that the same things that happened to me have happened to you 25 years later. Like, that's probably, it's been the driving force behind the work that I do, behind my the starting of my own company, the experiences that I had at my university. There's only one other African American female in the aviation program with me the 4 years I was there at the university. So I know the isolation. I know the feelings of you can't really put a finger on, the discrimination, the disenfranchisement, the preferential treatment that you
Mm-hmm.
then, realize, oh my God, like they've been hanging out all this time. No wonder he got
Exactly.
the best flight instructor, or, they having a study group. They've been having a study group, but I never even,
Yep.
you don't have to tell me your story because it's our story.
Mm-hmm.
Your story is my story, is the Tuskegee Airmen story, it's our predecessor story, it's Bessie Coleman's story. In 100 and almost 20 years now in the game, we are still up against the same struggles. So for me, The reason why when I get up in front of young people like yourself and things that you heard me talk about are so important is because so many people will not tell you the truth about the snares and the traps and the sheer force of will that's against you.
Right.
I mean, that it is an actual initiative, and this is what I've had to kind of come to grips with as I've grown and matured in my leadership and developing strategies, is to not just come against or stand for diversity and inclusion in the aviation industry, right? But to also combat the discriminatory practices in universities, in aviation organizations, social that's supposed to be social organizations, social clubs, that's supposed to help you build your professional acumen and help mentor you, that in the corporate workplace, at airports, it's everywhere. And this is another part of the story of being Black in America, right?
Yep.
It's not enough to fight for diversity. It's not enough to fight for the right to vote, because then when you get the right to vote, they come up with other stuff like they just did this week to disenfranchise voters all across America. And so we feel like we're in this vicious cycle of always trying to fight for our rights to just exist and be, and be not just at the table, but not to have you on my shoulder saying, you should be lucky
Right.
that I allowed you to be at our table.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, we helped build the table.
Exactly.
We helped make the food. We picked all the crops to prepare the whole meal for the table that you sit at. And we served you. Now we're at the table and we should be grateful. I want people that watch this, that hear this, young people of color, our white counterparts, our white male allies, we have to come to the realization that racism is not a Black problem. And it's not a problem for Black people to solve.
Exactly.
It's not our problem,
Right.
but we want to call it something different every time. Till we deal with that, what aviation looks like, what the finance industry looks like, what tech looks like, what engineering looks like, what construction looks like, what industry looks like is going to continue to be perpetuated until our white counterparts come alongside us and agree that this is also their problem.
Absolutely.
To help solve. And I say that with all sincerity, knowing that I have had an incredible amount of white allies to help me become and help AeroStar become what we are today. And it almost pains me to say that had it not been for them, it would not even be possible. My story wouldn't be possible.
Right.
And so it's still that leverage that you have to garner to be able to operate within the system. And so for me as a child, growing up in poverty, growing up in violence, growing up in crime, for me to kind of see what happened on the South Side and what's happening on the South Side of Chicago and in places like Milwaukee and in places like Gary, Indiana. I mean, these St. Louis, like these pockets are all over the country.
Right.
With a uniform story, with aviation programs in each one of those locales that create the same experience without tutelage, without a playbook, without a specific infrastructure for us to be disenfranchised. But the results are always the same. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that? If we can't uniformly teach kids how to read and write, and we can't uniformly teach, mathematics, how can we uniformly teach racism to the extent that it's duplicated around the country? Exactly. As if there is a formula. And so this is what makes me start to get my wheels turning about organizations like yours help and support and lend a voice to what really needs to happen, to not shrink back from the hard conversations that we need to have, for people like myself and like you and other leaders in the fight for equity in employment and in aviation education in the workforce. What does it look like for us to have to move the needle now, in the next 5 years, in the next 50 years,
Right.
in the next 100 years of aviation? I had one student ask on an event that we had that was called Bay Day, Black Aviation Excellence for Black History Month. It's awesome. It was awesome. The students had a question in the audience and asked, will there be Black people on Mars?
Mm.
And I said, that is an interesting question. The only way a Black person is going to be on Mars is, guess what? If we're invited to the table. It's been a lifelong struggle for me as a young person, as a little Black girl growing up in the hood, to show up on the scene in aviation with all of the survival skills from dodging bullets and sexual predators and the being counted out because I've heard I'm too pretty to laugh as loud as I do. I'm too pretty to talk as loud as I do. I couldn't be as smart as I look on paper. These are things that people have actually said to me, right?
Wow.
The shock and awe that I get when I show up in a room and I'm Black, because Tammera Holmes, especially before you could Google and look somebody up to see what they look like. I'm aging myself, but when I show up, it's like, oh, you Miss Holmes? Yeah, it's my meeting. Yeah.
Right.
Well, we need to speak to somebody that's in charge. Yep, I'm in charge. That's me. And when that is more normal than not, we literally have to start doing what I'm grateful to God that He allowed me to do for you, is to instill a level of confidence, a level of determination, ideology, and tools that can help you navigate throughout the process. When you only have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes to impact somebody for a lifetime, what are you going to say? What can you give them to carry with them? You can be anything you want to be? No.
Right. Everyone hears that one.
No, I'm not going to say that. Just try hard enough and you'll find success? No. Never give up? No. All of those are good. But what I want you to do with the Left Seat Club is make sure that when they're able to move from the right seat to the left seat, that they have everything that they need to be pilot in command. And when you're pilot in command, it does not matter who else is on board the vessel. This is the law, right?
Yep.
Doesn't matter who else is on the vessel. All souls on board, answer to you. There has to be a transition of a level of humility, intelligence, proficiency, excellence, safety. All of that goes into the left seat. But what you also have to bring to the left seat, which has been missing for generations because we haven't been there, is compassion, inclusivity, mentorship, to be able to pass the torch, because everyone in the right seat should eventually get to the left seat. And I don't know if you had questions lined up, and stop me whenever, because I could go on and
No,
on.
I do it, but I want you to talk, honestly, more than me.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. I'm trying to soak up as much as I can from you, honestly. Like, I've done my research, obviously, so I know what AeroStar is. You know, for the viewers who don't know, can you just explain a little bit what AeroStar is?
So AeroStar now is a brand. It is the brand that's known nationwide and even in some spots internationally as the leading organization in aviation and aerospace education and training for disadvantaged, underserved, minority, and female youth. We have been sought after at the highest levels of government, from the Pentagon, reaching out for us to advise on how to create a more diverse Air Force pilot fleet. I sit on the National Task Force for Youth Access to Aviation Jobs in America, appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. The AeroStar Consulting Corporation began as a nonprofit to do aviation consulting, but also to give back to young people through speaking engagements, career days, and things of that nature. And then I realized really early on that it wasn't enough. When I went in to speak to kids at school, they had no clue what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't ask questions, they didn't raise their hands. And when I went to other schools on the north side or in Naperville or other places like that, they like, my dad's a pilot, my uncle's a pilot,
Yeah.
I've been flying with my grandpa, he's a World War II veteran. And I'm like, okay, our kids have no clue what aviation is.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to start from the beginning. And that's when I started developing curriculum to teach kids as young as kindergarten how to become a part of the aviation industry. The one thing that led us really to the AeroStar Avion Institute was we received a call from a major corporate sponsor, Boeing, who was our largest partner, and we so grateful for the Boeing company. They wanted to give us $50,000, and we didn't even have a bucket to put it in. So we had to start a nonprofit in order to be able to receive corporate sponsorship for the work that we're doing. We now have over $500,000. We're looking to create a $500,000 in revenue budget over the next 2 years to be able to continue to run our aviation programs for free. We run aviation programs from K through 4, which is our AeroSparks program. I think that's so cute.
That's a good name.
The AeroStar's Aviation Exploration, which is 5th through 8th grade. The AeroStar's Aviation Exploration Apprenticeships, which are pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeships, and advanced apprenticeship program for high schoolers. And we are launching our Aero Ambassador Alliance, which are all of our AeroStar alumni, students who have gone through our program since 2012, who have now gone out into the industry and become leaders in the aviation community. And then the newest one that we're working on now is Aero Work. It's all about creating pipelines with licensing and certification directly from high school into the workforce. Wow. And we could not be more proud of the work that we're doing to change the face of aviation, one kid at a time. I just got word this morning that we have received our trademark for our official slogan, which is giving wings to dreams. And we have been giving wings to dreams since 2008. And it's been a tremendous ride, and I could not be more proud of my team and the work that we've accomplished to change the game for the future of aviation.
I saw your TED Talk. I watched it last night, and that was amazing too. You talked about kind of like the chemistry in the brain.
Get kids high.
Yeah, and that honestly made sense.
It makes sense to every kid from the urban community that I talk to. And I actually had a parent that reached out to me and said, I would love to support your campaign, but I think that you're sending a negative message by using drug metaphors for the work that you do. And I said, I didn't even reply. I could have took the time and energy, but for people that don't get it, it's okay. That look like you, the people that look like me, that come from where we come from, who operate and have operated at a high level of trauma, of being exposed to violence. I can't even imagine you as a young Black man seeing Black men killed on video. Mm-hmm. Like, what do they think that does to the brain? And I'm working on a book by the same title, Get Kids High. And it's really talking about replacement theology or replacement psychology. Mm-hmm. If you're going to take away something, you can't just tell young men, get off the street, stop selling drugs, lead a gang.
Right, and not replace it with
something.
Right.
So the AeroStar community was built to be an aviation gang, if that's what you want to call it.
Right.
Kids can come, they can rank up, they actually get in leadership roles. The product that they're pushing is aviation because it's addictive, it's highly contagious. And you know, and I know that the feeling of flight is euphoric. Flying releases the exact same chemicals in the brain as if the kids were doing drugs. So why is the title Get Kids High inappropriate?
Right.
It's actually more appropriate than any other thing that I think I've ever put to illustrate and depict visually what we do. We literally get kids high, metaphorically and physically. We take them off the ground, put them in airplanes, get them in the aviation industry, and we're transforming their brain that is a trauma brain to now with a new terminology have been coined as trauma-based learning. I didn't know what trauma-based learning was when I did that TED Talk. I never heard of trauma-based learning. But now psychologists are looking at trauma-based learning and how to teach to the traumatic brain. Well, if I walk around my community with my level of anxiety up here, what do you think you need to do to get me excited about anything?
Right, it needs to be all right.
You got to come harder than that.
Exactly.
I'm dodging bullets to get here. And you want me to sit in class?
Flying literally gives you a high, you know, in your brain and, you know, releases all these, you know, these chemicals. Why did you choose the management side of the aviation industry compared to the flying side?
That is an excellent question. And nobody has ever correlated the two. For me, flying as a job did not produce the same effects in my mind for my brain, because I'm left and right brain, that it does for other people who are completely addicted and committed to flying airplanes for a living. For me, sitting in a cockpit for hours was not fun. Sitting in the cockpit alone for hours doing cross countries and was not fun. I want to talk to people. I want to hang out. Extrovert. I'm a creative. I'm a techie. You usually don't, people that have left and right brain are always forced to choose, especially in school. If you have a kid that loves music and wants to be, but they're really good at math, the teacher's going to tell them, no, don't worry about having a career as a musician. You're not going to make no money. Focus on your math and let the music be your backup plan. And you look at most of the people that made it big in the industry, they dropped out of school and went directly into music and became huge because that's their thing. Right. Why we minimize other people's capacity to be great in areas that other people don't see as viable as avenues of greatness for us is doing a huge disservice to young people. Go to school, get good grades, but don't put your passion and your desires on the back burner. And that's the reason why I had to choose to leave flying as a career pathway, because there was no job in aviation as a pilot that would have suited me, would have suited my brain. I've always wanted to be a boss and a leader, and I wanted to make money. I went directly into an aviation consulting firm that made a tremendous amount of revenue. Right. I was a professional and a manager and a leader in the organization within 5 years of graduating, and most of my friends were still trying to get there
to the airlines,
get to the ATP, and get to the airlines, and living in studio apartments and not being able to pay their bills. I bought a house at 24. I bought a brand new car at 22, 23. I had never had a car before. The first car I bought had 400 miles on. I made decisions that worked best for my brain, and so that's one of the things that I'm teaching young people.
Was there any like specific project or plan that that was like the most difficult for you when you worked for Landrum and Brown?
That's a really good question. When I worked for Landrum and Brown, we had a lot of different projects. Working for Landrum and Brown was an entirely different beast in itself, because that was my first job in aviation. It's my first professional job. And every other job that I had a task. I only had low level, entry level positions, but the entry level job here, I realized that I was actually an analyst, right? So analysts actually analyze. So I remember I told you I'm left and right brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to use my creativity and my analytical skills to solve problems. Now, when I'm solving problems, one of the ones that I thought probably stands out the most to me that was tough was right after September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
I started work in April, and I had only been at the company May, June, July, August, September, 5 months, going on 5 months, so 4 months. And I was asked to create a graphic that showed the temporary flight restriction zone over downtown. So you have to create the TFR. Now that's super easy, right? We got all these type of graphics and apps,
Right.
and this was in 2001.
Wow.
After September 11th happened, it was such an emotional time for us as a company. We didn't know what was going to happen with the company. So I think the pressure of that project for me to create this graphic of the temporary flight restriction zone over downtown, which is the general public knows that as a no-fly zone.
Right.
We know it as a TFR because that's what we've been trained. That's the appropriate term for it. And doing that project was just it was so heavy for me. Not that I didn't have the skills, but when you are doing something like that for like agency,
Mm-hmm.
this wasn't like write a report or go look at some numbers or pull, XYZ off of, the internet. And like that was entry level stuff too, right? Like regular intern stuff, like
Right.
just go do some stuff. For them to ask me to create the TFR graphic for the no-fly zone over downtown after September 11th was like, I got to get this right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really tough project. I had the skills to do it, like I said, but it was really heavy to be able to think that what I'm about to create means that I'm showing basically the United States of America, but particularly our Chicagoland audience, where airplanes can and cannot fly. Mm-hmm. Over downtown. Got it done and turned it in. And as an analyst and as the low level, you never hear about what your work does after you turn it in. It's like, thanks, go back to your corner till we need you, right? And that night, it was on the news. Everybody like, I did that today. I did that today at work. It was such a gratifying. I think that was my first realization of how important the work I did as an aviation consultant mm-hmm. was to the masses, right? Because as a consultant, and this was also a hard lesson to learn, you don't get credit for anything issued by the Department of Aviation in partnership with the Federal Aviation Administration. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, but I know I did that.
Right, that was all you.
It happened again in 2003. We were writing what they call the environmental impact statement mm-hmm. for the O'Hare modernization program. Now again, this was 2003. And I actually have, if you want to show it on video, I have kept a copy of it for years. It says draft, but this is my final copy of what is from Tammera Holmes, Landrum and Brown to these two people at the Federal Aviation Administration.
Wow.
Do you see this?
Oh my gosh, that is super thick.
Pages and pages of numbers, calculations. No, these aren't just regular sheets. These are legal size papers that we had to print out. So we actually have to fold, Z-fold is what this was called. See, this is old school right here. Wow. This was work. I took a copy of this because this was my second biggest project and probably the one that helped seal my career as an aviation professional. I actually I wrote 3 sections of the document that gave O'Hare the permission to move 1 spoonful of dirt to start the construction project at O'Hare International Airport, which became the O'Hare Modernization Program and the runway reconfigurations of all of the runways at O'Hare, but it was really hard. That document was probably 3 years, 2 or 3 years in the making. After September 11th in 2001, that was in 2004. One for O'Hare was really special to me, and it allowed me to see how the work that I did, again, impacted the masses. So for me to leave corporate and start a nonprofit, why would I not think that I can impact the masses? Right. Now I'm doing it in a way that lends itself to leadership, to advocacy, to policy, federal policy, legislation. And that's what I've always done. I just did it for other people. I did it for projects, I did it for other businesses. Now I do it for us.
The aviation industry is dominated by white men, like that's not, uncommon, or that's not like a myth or anything, so, being a successful woman of color, has there ever been a time that you can just think of off the top of your head that you had to overcome either racism or sexism in, the industry?
The hardest times were the ones that I mentioned before at my university. Those were really hard. Not that I was questioning confidence in myself, but the culture shock alone was something that I just wasn't prepared for. Because I thought that I was used to being around and that I had great relationships with white people. All my teachers was white. Loved my teachers. They loved me. I had white people in my honors classes. Now, granted, all the white people in the school mostly were in honors classes. I went to a 98% Black school.
Right.
So that's in my honors classes. I had couple of Asians, couple of one African, 3 Indians, people whose parents had migrated here. And we were like the United Nations. We were completely in lockstep academically. We met outside of class. We hung out together. If there had been any social media, we would have all been, friends. We really had a camaraderie. And these are the same kids that I was in class with from freshman year to senior year. Because when you're in honors classes, you literally have the same kids right. in your classes, except for gym, art, music, or whatever else you get to throw in there, health. But I think when I got to the university, I was not prepared for how people who didn't look like me treated me, because I had never experienced that. And so I knew that racism existed. I knew that discrimination existed. But, when I saw with my own eyes and felt, those daggers, it was never, calling me the N-word or, anything as explicit. Mm-hmm. But the implicit bias and the treatment, it was all there. It was all there. And just like you said at the beginning of this interview, before you realize what it was, you come to the realization that it was there all the time. Yeah. It was there all the time. And so I can't say that professionally I had any of those experiences, because I just never allowed myself, and this again comes from my hood upbringing. I'm a very cordial, very jovial, very engaging person. But the way that I carry myself can be intimidating. And I was told by one of my white male supervisors the day before September 11th happened, actually, that I would probably never be in front of the client. And while I do exude a tremendous amount of self-confidence, I have to understand that my colleagues may respond negatively to that. Talking to now, I know that he wasn't saying it in a demeaning way. Mm-hmm. He was asserting his position as a white male in the aviation industry, who is accustomed to and had been accustomed to people like me never being in front of the client and not having the type of confidence that I had showing up to work every day. I showed up to win every day. Right. And I felt like it was used against me, created animosity, maybe, I wouldn't say jealousy. I wouldn't call it jealousy, but it did for my supervisor to tell me how other people react to my level of confidence let me know that there was intimidation.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that often, and I often respond to that by saying, if I was a white male, no one would call me aggressive. No one would call me intimidating. No one would call me loud.
Yeah.
They would never do it.
Right.
Because when I'm in a room with them, I talk like them. I act like them. We're more alike than we are different. So much so that my online profile and all of the algorithms that try to assess who I am as a human being, they believe I'm a middle-aged, wealthy white male. I show up as a Black woman in a 95% white male space. Who I literally identify with more than most Black women, it boggles the mind. Like, how can you and this 60-year-old white man be so much alike? Because we're human, and we don't really fit in the boxes that you try to make us fit into. But we conform because we get tired of fighting.